import configuration defines how WQX Web should interpret or read your import file. It identifies each column that you will have in your import file, the data elements, each column, and the format that you will use for the existing date, time, latitude, longitude. And basically what it does is it says, okay, my data set says this, so my import configuration needs to read my data set appropriately. So as long as you save your import configurations, you can share them with other individuals. You can reuse them over and over again. And this is another area, you hear me saying this a lot, is that this is a situation where you want to create an import configuration one time and one time only, and reuse it over and over and over again. And the only reason you would have to change around your import configuration is if your column order within your data set changes. So let's dive right into it. So we go into WQX Web. We have this list, this left-hand menu. The first link, import configurations. Now, when you click on import configurations, you're going to come up with a list of all of the import configurations that you actually have rights to. Now, I know that all of the individuals you will see all of these import configurations. Now, if you use the WQX Web template or you use the same column order, there is already an import configuration built for you, and that will be right here, the WQX Web template regular results. If you use the WQX Web template anything, whether it's projects, monitoring and locations, if you have biological data, whether you have counts, MPNs, anything like that, that is also defaulted as its own import configuration. But I'm actually going to take it on and say, hey, I have a data set that I want to use, and I want to create my own import configuration. So how do I do that? Well, you'll click this bottom left-hand link. It says Add New. We are going to choose, you have three different methods. You can, you can create one from scratch. You can copy an existing import configuration that already exists. And you can also import a saved import configuration. Now, the latter two are things that a more advanced user would understand. So if you're just starting from scratch, you have a data set, you know it's completely unique to yourself, we're going to create it from scratch. We're going to choose the appropriate import configuration type, which will be activities and results. And you can see we can do a number of projects, monitoring locations, weights, indexes, activity groups, so on. So we're going to choose activity results. I'm going to click Continue. And here is my blank slate. This is my import configuration detail page. Now, within this import configuration detail page, this is where things start to kind of make sense as to what an import configuration is. So I'm going to kind of reformat my windows here and just kind of drive home the point of what these import configurations mean. So I'm going to orient my column header in my, if you remember our activity ID example, I'm just going to use that. Okay, so you can see we have our actual data set down here, and we have the import configuration detail page up here. So let me just go through describing what is an import configuration. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to name it, and I'm just going to call this, New Jersey Presentation 2 Import Configuration. Now, in the description, I know it's not required to have a description, but I think it's very valuable to actually list or label what data set you use to import this file, into WQX with. Because this makes it a lot easier in locating, okay, I have all of these import configurations. Now, what format or what data did I use to import with? So here, this is called activities and results.xlsx. So I'm just going to say, used with activities and results.xlsx. And that is my appropriate description. Another thing you could say, uses access database query X, Y, Z, whatever you want to call it. So that is a useful, that's where I find use in the description area. So moving down from there, the column delimiter. So what file format are you going to import your file as? Are you going to import it as a .txt, or are you going to enter it as a .csv? Now, I have an Excel file, but I am going to choose to use it as a .csv. So I'll just put in parentheses that even though I work within the Excel file, I always save as, and I save it as a CSV before I import it, and then I'm just going to change that over to comma. So we have entered our name, we've entered a description, we have our column delimiter set appropriately. Let's go down and let's just save it. Let's see what happens. So you're going to see here that if there is something that is incorrect or invalid within your import configuration, that you're going to be warned about it up here every time you hit save. So right here we have an activity start date must have a format. That's just a nuance, so we'll quickly just enter the month, day, year, scroll back down to the bottom, click save, and we're good to go. Okay, so we've only entered kind of like the smaller elements. We actually have not mapped this to our data set. So we have this activities and results page that is X number of columns long. It goes to column S. And you can see, it goes column A is project ID, column B is monitoring location ID, activity ID, so on and so forth. And so I want to say, hey, import configuration, the order of my column order in my data set is as such. And you can see that it does not match up exactly. Column A, project ID, is already in column E in this import configuration. So we want to shift all of these defaulted elements around and get it all sorted out correctly. So how do I do that? So we know project ID is in column A. Project ID we located right here. So we are going to insert that as column A just by clicking on that drop-down menu. It'll automatically refresh, and you will see that it is now in column A. Monitoring location, column B. Okay, I need to go to find I got to find my monitoring location. Go to column B. Activity ID is column C. Oh, look at that, just kind of defaulted itself. Activity media is column D, so let's put that in there. Activity start date is F. Activity start date already there. Activity start time. Okay, let's find start time. So, all right. So here's a scenario where the start time is not included in the defaulted data elements. So how do I actually get an activity start time? Or how do I get any other element than what is just defaulted here? Well, that's as easy as just clicking. You can see this whole list of data elements, and all of a sudden it just stops. There's a blank one right here. But there's still this little pick list box. So if you click on that little pick box, this is where you get the master list of all of the data elements. And we are specifically start time. So if I go down, I'll click start time. Now, just from experience, I know that start time zone is also going to be required, but it's also in our data set as well. So let's add that as well. And I have so I'm just going to add those two for now. You have the ability to map the elements to a single column. That's an advanced user feature, what we call a cross-tab file. And that's something that we'll brush upon next week as well. But for now, let's just add those two. Click OK. Scroll to the bottom. You can see we now have start time and start time zone. So let's put start time in column G. Start time zone in column H. And I'm just going to scroll over my data set, get this column H. Okay, so activity comment is column I. Let's see if I have an activity comment. Okay, I do not, so let's add that in there by clicking that pick list box. Activity comment right there. Click OK. Activity comment goes into I. Sample collection method ID is J, already mapped up. Sample collection equipment name is in K, that's already mapped up. Characteristic name is column L, let's put that in there. Okay, result measure is column M. So that's going to be result value, be column M. Units is going to be N. Oh, I put that in M. I got to go fix that. Put that in N. Sample fraction is O. Let's see if I have sample fraction listed here. Result sample fraction is going to be O. Analytical method ID is going to be column P. Analytical method context is column Q. Result status is R. And then finally, the result value type is S. So you can see that there's still some elements that I have left that I did not necessarily include in my data set. And so, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of those by clicking the remove until I get to column S. Get rid of the excess elements that I'm not utilizing within this specific data set. Okay, and there you go. So we have now created an import configuration in literally less than 10 minutes for a flat file is what we call data set. So this data set is now mapped in WQX Web under the import configuration labeled New Jersey Presentation to Import Configuration. But there's one last step that I like to show users is, well, I have this import configuration and I have this data set, but how do I make sure, for certain, that my column order matches? Well, if you see there's this column header that we can copy into Excel, if you just click on this refresh button right here, that's going to give us a tab-delimited column header that I can just Control-C. I can insert a row in our data set, paste it in, and from here I can actually compare what is in the import configuration, which I've listed in red, and what does actually my data say in the black column. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly go through here. Okay, I know it doesn't say exactly, activity media name, but I know that that's correct. Start date, start time, comment, analytical method ID, equipment name, characteristic name, result value unit, sample fraction, status, value type. Okay, so now I am certain that my data matches the import configuration. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about that exercise that I just performed in creating this import configuration to match this basic data set right here? Okay, well, I hope that kind of clarified the concept of an import configuration, how it is used to map the specific data elements in your data set to WQX Web. You can see, it's a one-to-one. My product ID is in column A. I'm going to put my product ID in column A in my import configuration. And it also shows off just how flexible WQX Web can be in tailoring to your specific data set. If you don't necessarily have, let me just show you an example of a slightly more advanced, method of modifying this import configuration. If we have activity start time, but we don't necessarily have activity start time zone, let's just say that this time zone was just like an arbitrary ignore column. But now I click save, and it's like, okay, that's what my data looks like. Let's see what this says. It says, okay, well, based on the current elements you've included, you still need to include the activity start time zone. It's like, well, I never sample under multiple activity start time zones, so I know it's always going to be the same. So what I can do two things. I can either throw it up in the generated values section. Now, the generated values section, and I apologize for not covering this beforehand, is essentially where all elements go that are required conditionally by WQX, but don't necessarily change over time. So We can add the time zone up here just by clicking on that pick list box and selecting it, or you can literally add it in the start time column, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to click on the start time, and I'm going to scroll down and find start time zone. I want to add that to the start time column. You can see both of those were selected. I'm going to click OK, and we scroll down, and we now see that we have activity start time and time zone both populated under the same column. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, every time you see an activity start time, I'm just going to choose Alaska Daylight Time because I think that's a fun one to use. Every time you see a start time, I want you to affiliate the Alaska Daylight Time with that specific time. Now, you can do this type of defaulting multiple data elements per column, and that gets into a more advanced feature called cross-tab import configurations. And I'm not going to create a cross-tab import configuration in this demonstration, but let me give you a quick example of what a cross-tab file actually looks like. So I'm going to hop in here. That's the recording from last week. Okay, so here is an example of a cross-tab file. So I know that lab or organization result exports come in all shapes and sizes, and this is what we call a cross-tab format, where you have the header row that distinguishes the characteristic name in the units, but still has all the activity level elements in the regular columns. But let's take it a step further. We can even map data that just looks like this. Temp, degree. So as long as I just have the required, let me see, DO, milligrams per liter, and this is pH. Oh, that's not OH, that's pH. So we can even map data that looks like this. So just because you've only seen data sets that have one result per row, if you get a set of field parameters that look like this, we can default and create an import configuration that maps appropriately to this style of data. Now, if you're starting from scratch, keep it simple. Do the flat file that we just demonstrated beforehand, like this, with one result per row. And if you'd like a copy of this example, please let me know, and I'll send that over to you. But I just wanted to kind of show off and just show you how flexible WQX Web can be in creating an import configuration that tailors to your data set and not vice versa.